What are we discussing on today's podcast, you ask? Is Zac Gallen a big game pitcher? And who could be the next Diamondback player to get extended? Discussing all that on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper Picks. You can win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. I'm Millard Thomas, host of this wonderful podcast. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 from my personal account, or just look up Locked on Diamondbacks about Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe on the Locked on Diamondbacks YouTube channel. Don't have any friends joining us for today's stream. No bobbleheads on today's stream because the Dbacks took a loss. I got my Zac Gallen bobblehead looking at me right in my eyes right now, but I can't even look at that bobblehead right now because Zac Gallen had a really poor performance in game one against the LA Dodgers. And then because of this, I was seeing questions on Twitter like, is Zac Gallen really a big game pitcher? Is he really that guy in high pressure moments? Should it be Merrill Kelly starting in game one of the playoffs? And I understand why people are questioning this because Zac Gallen had a really bad start against a great team, a playoff team, a team that you will have to go through if you do want to make it to the promised land late in the season. Crucial game when the Dbacks are fighting for their wild card spot. And what happens? Zac Gallen, the guy who is favorite for the Cy Young Award, struggles, and he gives up the most home runs he's ever allowed in a start. And now people are questioning whether it should be Merrill Kelly that starts game one of a postseason game for the Dbacks. And listen, I know it has been bad against the Dodgers this season for Zac Gallen. He's given up 11 earned runs in his last two starts against the Dodgers. I don't know what's happened. I mean, he didn't look too confident attacking the zone tonight. His command wasn't the best. I don't know why that's been after having, I think he was on a streak of 5 straight quality starts, and then he has this poor performance against the Dodgers where immediately you knew it was not going to be a great Zac Gallen game because he gave up 3 runs in the first inning of the ball game, and that was going to be a bad omen, and that just set a bad tone for the rest of the game. But before this season, Zac Gallen was really good against the Dodgers in his career. It was like a 2-3 ERA or something entering this season against the Dodgers over the course of his whole career. So even though he hasn't been good against LA this season, over the course of his career, Zac Gallen has been good against LA. So even if the D-backs do play the Dodgers in the postseason, if we get to that scenario, I don't want to just say, you know what, Gallen hasn't been good against the Dodgers this season, so let's automatically start Merrill Kelly. I'm not against starting Merrill Kelly, but let's look at a larger sample size before we start making proclamations like that for Zac Gallen. Start saying Zac Gallen is not that big game pitcher or that guy that could come through for you in high pressure moments, because Gallen in his career, a low 3 ERA against teams with a winning record. It's like a 3.09 ERA against teams with a winning record. And for his career, this is a pitcher who gets better in the second half of the season. If you want to know the character, the makeup of a player, if they get better as the season wears on, when your body is more fatigued, when the games matter more, Zac Gallen in his career, first half, mid-3 ERA kind of a pitcher, second half, upper 2s ERA kind of a pitcher. So this is someone that definitely does get better as the season progresses. And look, I'm not going to be mad if Kelly does start game one because Kelly is very deserving. As I've said plenty of times on this podcast, Kelly is one of the most underrated pitchers in baseball. I don't want to say underappreciated because I think every D-backs fan overly appreciates Merrill Kelly, and I think it probably evens out. But Merrill Kelly is just one of the best pitchers in baseball. And guess what? If you do think Merrill Kelly has a little bit more, poise to him in those big pressure moments, because Merrill Kelly's like freaking 35 years old. This man used to pitch in career and had to work his way back to the, American League Baseball. Like, this is not, Kelly is a seasoned veteran. He has no BS with him. Like, Kelly has been around the block. He's a little bit more mature. He's a little bit older than Zac Gallen. So if he's not as phased, it's because Merrill Kelly has been through some stuff. So I'm not surprised at all. So I wouldn't be mad if the D-backs want to start Merrill Kelly in the game one. I just want the rationale to be because we think he's the best option going into this game. Maybe he pitched really well against his team. I don't want the rationale to be, well, I just don't think Zac Gallen is that guy. Like, I don't think he's that guy. I don't think he's a big game pitcher. Like, that should not be the reasoning if Zac Gallen does not start a game one, because I just don't think we have I don't think we have a large enough sample size to even determine that. Like, I want to see once we get to the playoffs, actually, because that will actually tell me who's Himothy and who's not, who's Hemi Butler and who's not. Couple more notes from this game. Gabriel Moreno, absolutely fantastic. The rest of the offense didn't really capitalize with runners in scoring position, but Moreno, he's batting like 380 since he's returned from injury. Web gems against the Cincinnati Reds, RBI doubles and home runs in this game against the Dodgers. Like, Gabriel Moreno is just so much fun to watch, and I can't believe at one point he wasn't the everyday catcher for the D-backs, but injury played a part of that, so I understand. Didn't mind seeing Alek Thomas in the number 5 hole. I think Alek Thomas is really starting to come on. I think we all know that. Seeing how he's played the last 3 weeks of the season. While he's hot, I don't mind riding the hot hand, batting him 5th. He's playing really well. Every time he swings the bat, he seems to be making good contact. He's hitting a lot of hard line drives as well. So I'm a big fan of what Alek Thomas is doing at the plate right now. And for the game tomorrow, big matchup for the D-backs. Merrill Kelly is going to have to right the ship because Zac Gallen could not in game one, as we discussed. We're going to have a big matchup, Merrill Kelly versus Clayton Kershaw. I guess at the time of you guys listening to the podcast, the game will be today. Merrill Kelly in his career, or not his career, this season against the Dodgers, really good. The reverse of Zac Gallen, because in 3 starts, 15.1 innings pitched, Merrill Kelly has allowed just 2 earned runs against the Dodgers this season. That's not a surprise to see why everyone on Twitter after this game was like, start Merrill Kelly in game 1 of the playoffs, because Merrill Kelly is as cool as the other side of the pillow, as Stuart Scott used to say. And then going against Merrill Kelly is, of course, Clayton Kershaw, one of the best pitchers we've ever seen grace the baseball diamond, but this is a guy who's getting a little bit older. And listen, if the D-backs do face off against the Dodgers in the postseason, I do want to face off against Clayton Kershaw, because yes, he could go out there and have a fantastic start against the D-backs, but if there's any pitcher that has a more volatile playoff resume than a Clayton Kershaw, I don't know if there is one, because that guy can either be the greatest pitcher of all time in a start in the playoffs, because we know he's got that kind of talent in the regular season, or he can quite literally be 2023 Madison Bumgarner in a start in the postseason. So I wouldn't mind at all seeing Kershaw in a playoff start. But for his start tomorrow, Kershaw this season against the D-backs, he's been fine, a 3.75 ERA, 5 earned runs, over 12 innings pitched against the D-backs. Now the kicker, the D-backs have 3 home runs against Kershaw this season, so hopefully they can tap into that power department against Kershaw a little bit more. Going to need a big win, because the Giants are currently playing Cincinnati, and the D-backs need to finish ahead of both of those teams, because I think the Giants also, off the top of my head, I think the Giants as well hold the playoff tiebreaker over the D-backs. So D-backs need to keep pace ahead of both those teams, only a half game ahead of the Giants right now. And so the D-backs need a big win in game 2 with Merrill Kelly on the mound. Now we're going to be talking about which Diamondbacks player can be extended next. But first, I need to talk to you guys about Sleeper, because The fantasy season is upon us, and there's no better app to use for fantasy football than the Sleeper app, because I just did my dynasty draft this past week on the Sleeper app, and it was absolutely perfect and flawless. First of all, Sleeper archives all my players for me year to year. I got my roster from last year. You could do the rookie draft on there, the normal draft. It's absolutely perfect, and that's not even the best part about Sleeper. They also have daily fantasy where you can actually win money. You can pick Corbin Carroll, Shohei Ohtani to hit a home run. You pick players, you pick stats, you get it right. Guess what? You can win big. Not just big, you can win huge with up to 100 times payout. Yes, that's right, 100 times. So use promo code Locked On. You'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. And don't forget to catch every Dbacks pitch on their hometown broadcast when you download the Sirius XM app and search up Diamondbacks. Now let's get back into the Diamondbacks podcast. Let's discuss some contract stuff with the D-backs, because I want to talk about, because the reason I want to discuss this is because on tomorrow's podcast, we're going to do a little crossover with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres, and we're drafting, as we always do, the worst. Well, we're doing another draft as we always do, but the topic for tomorrow's draft will be worst contracts in Major League Baseball. So I want to do a little contract segment for the D-backs and discuss who are the bad contracts currently on the books, which players can turn into a bad contract, who's up next for an extension, and is anyone worthy of being locked down to the Corbin Carroll level. So bad contracts on the books. Is there anyone we should be concerned about giving a bad contract to? And then is there anybody that should be locked up right now? Those are the three questions I want to answer. The first question: are there any bad contracts on the books? Not really. Guys, I'm not going to listen to you. If you did a trivia game, a baseball trivia game, and you asked me the question, for 500, what team does Mark Melancon play for? I would have given you I don't know, because I'm not gonna lie, I totally forgot Mark Melancon was still on this D-backs roster, currently injured, currently soaking in like $5 or $6 million. He's probably one of the worst deals on this on the payroll, but I wouldn't say it's like a terrible contract. Jace Peterson making $5 million next year, and again, not terrible $5 million, but considering, I do want to put a little respect on Jace Peterson's name because he was really good in that Cincinnati Reds series. But overall, when I got guys like Perdomo and Ketel Marte and at least a Buddy Kennedy and Emmanuel Rivera, and there's a Blaze Alexander and a Jordan Lawler not too far away. Like, there's so many interesting, infielders. There's still guys on the free agent markets. Like, there are so many options, and it's like I have to pay Jace Peterson $5 million, and he can't really do anything. Like, he's got solid speed, but don't really love him as an offensive or defensive player. He's not a long-term option. I like the young guys in our building better. I like the guys on the free agent market better, but instead I have to keep Jace Peterson on the payroll and pay him another $5 million. Not in love with that idea, but again, not a terrible contract. And then probably the worst contract on the books, gonna be paying Madison Bumgarner $5 million a year till 2027. Mad Bum, the ghost of Mad Bum, still haunts the D-backs, and he will be stealing money out of our payroll jar for the next 3 seasons. But those are the really only 3 bad deals on the books. I wouldn't say there's any other bad contracts currently. Now, are there any potential bad contracts that the D-backs might be handing out? I think you can make an argument that there is potential for Christian Walker to land on a bad deal, or at least just a bad situation to happen with Christian Walker, depending on how the D-backs handle it, because Christian Walker is currently 32 years old, still arbitration eligible for next season. But then after that, it's like, what do you do when Christian Walker is like 33, 34 years old? You're not going to give him like a 5-year deal that'll pay him until he's 39 years old, right? The way he's playing right now, he's looking really good. He seems to get better season after season, and it's like he's going to put together maybe a 3 or 4 year sample size, where he's going to be like a 800 plus OPS guy, a 30 home run guy. And if you go back to like, if you look back since like 2019, like, it's a pretty large sample size of Christian Walker being an above average first baseman offensively, and also being arguably the best defensive first baseman in Major League Baseball, where he's like a borderline all-star level player. So it's like, what kind of contract does that entail for Christian Walker? I don't think the D-backs are going to pony up $20 million a year for Christian Walker. So I do think there's a scenario where maybe contract negotiations could get a little messy, because what if Christian Walker does want like a 4-year, $80 million deal? Are the D-backs going to do that? Hopefully, best case scenario, I think the D-backs give him like a 3 for 32, maybe a 2 for 20, considering where he is at that point of his career. I think giving him 10 to 15 million a year for 2 or 3 years would be perfectly fine at that age with the production that he's put up for the D-backs. I would be pretty happy with that. I just think that is a scenario where it could get a little messy depending on what Christian Walker wants and how he looks at that age. And also considering he's barely been paid with the production he's already put up on this arbitration, situation. And then the final question I've, of course, had for this segment is there anybody else that should be locked up right now? And I mean extended, like a Corbin Carroll, or like a fat extension where it's like 5 years, guys getting really good money. Maybe he's like a top 5 highest paid player at his position. Like, is there anybody like that right now? Because I think the best question for this, the best player that fits this question is probably a Zac Gallen, who you don't have to pay for the next 3 seasons because he is arbitration eligible. But I do think you have to question of, what do you think is better? Do you think it's better to play out Gallen's next 3 years for the cheap? You don't have to pay him big money at all while he's pitching like a Cy Young candidate, the Cy Young Award winner, you could even say. So for the next 3 years, you could pay him cheap. But then at age 30, when he is going to be up for free agency, you can either let him walk as an unrestricted free agent, or you could give him a massive deal at age 30, which we know has been a huge risk. A lot of these pitchers, when they hit their free agency right at that age of 30, 31, you give him that 5, 6, 7-year deal. It typically doesn't work out. So that's a big risk, but at least he's cheap on the front end. The other option is you give him maybe a 6-year deal right now, right after the season. He wins a Cy Young, and you reward him with a contract that pays him what he's worth for the rest of his prime, right? 28 to like 33, you get to pay Zac Gallen for his prime, basically until 32, 33. And then you don't have to think about when he's 30 years old. Now, do I want to give him a 6-year deal that will pay him just for his 30s? Maybe he's still in his prime, maybe he ages well, but maybe he doesn't. That's a big risk as well. And instead, you'd be paying him $20 million a year right now for his best years, instead of maybe paying him $20 million down the line, because I think either way you're going to have to pay him. Because I think if you do let it play out and you try to do like a 4-year deal when he's 30 years old, like I think that's the best case scenario. You play it out, he turns 30, and then you try to give him a 4-year deal. Like, that's probably what I would do. I probably would play it out. I would probably, just because he's so cheap right now, is such a steal. You're getting Cy Young talent for basically nothing. I think I would play it out for the next few seasons. And then when he turns 30, try to convince him of a 4-year deal. I think you probably want a 5 or 6-year deal, because that's what it seems like guys of his caliber get when they hit the open market, like a Carlos Rodon, who we just saw from this past year, 30 years old. 6 years, right? Robbie Ray, he was like 30. He got like a 5 or 6-year deal. So did Kevin Gausman. So all those guys command that. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Zac Gallen also will command that when he turns 30, because guess what? The bill is going to come due. And if you don't pay Zac Gallen now, you're going to have to pay him later. I think Zac Gallen would be probably more graceful, later in contract negotiations if you paid him now. Then by that second contract, it would probably be easier to give him a short-term deal. But if you don't pay him through arbitration and you just let him play out the rest of his contract as a Cy Young potential guy, season after season, while making nickels on the dollar, then he's going to be like, you know what? I'm going to command a lot, and these negotiations could get nasty because you didn't pay me what I was worth the last few years. And now I'm going to need to be paid in reparations for all the time missed. So that's the kind of dangerous game you play. You can wait. You can get the cheap contract right now, but then you may have to pay a lot more on the back end, or you could pay him what he's worth right now. And in the end, the total value may end up paying Zac Gallen even more, but at least you would pay him for his prime right now. Then you have a better chance of giving him short-term deals on the back end. So I think that's what I would do with Zac Gallen. Play it out for the rest of arbitration, and then hopefully you could give him a 4-year deal, but you probably won't be able to. And I think I would be fine just giving him a 5-year deal at age 30, because I still think Zac Gallen has the kind of game that should age gracefully, because I don't think Zac Gallen is not the kind of guy that relies on a fastball and relies on gas. This is a guy that has a whole arsenal of pitches, can make things move. So I think Zac Gallen will age gracefully. So I wouldn't mind at all playing it out through arbitration and then giving him a fat contract when he is up for free agency. Now, how about the rest of the roster? As much as I love a Geraldo Perdomo, I don't think that all-star appearance means too much to me. I love Brandon Pfaadt, but I'm not going to give him the Corbin Carroll treatment. First, I need a larger sample size. Secondly, usually don't give pitchers that lockup treatment like a Fernando Tatis or Corbin Carroll. Not enough consistency from a McCarthy or Alec Thomas at this point. I think the only player who I do have an eye on that could be extended to a reasonable deal is a Gabriel Moreno, just because it's so hard to find a real game-changing difference maker at that position, someone that could both be a contributor for you in the middle of your lineup and be deadly behind the plate. That's very tough to find. The Braves just got one and locked Murphy up. So I think if the D-backs did that with Gabriel Moreno, I think that would be a pretty good idea as well. And for the D-backs, you look at their payroll, Ketel Marte on the books for the next few years, Corbin Carroll on the books for the next few years. But outside of that, payroll is pretty thin. D-backs sit in a good place, and there's no excuses for why Mike Hazen and this D-backs front office can't spend a little money in the offseason over the next few years.